Before dawn on a quiet Sunday in 1942, thousands of Americans woke up to discover that their hometown no longer existed, at least not in the way it had the night before. Roads were suddenly blocked, farms were condemned, mail stopped arriving, and armed guards stood where neighbors once chatted. None of them had been told why. None of them were allowed to ask, and none of them yet knew that they had just become part of one of the most secret, astonishing, and world-changing stories in American history. That place was Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and for a brief moment in time, it was the most important town on Earth. The story begins not with a town, but with fear. In 1939, as war spread across Europe, American scientists received alarming news. Nazi Germany was actively researching nuclear fission. Physicists understood what this meant. If Hitler developed an atomic bomb first, the war and the world would end on his terms. Albert Einstein, a pacifist by nature, reluctantly signed a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning that a single bomb could destroy an entire city. Roosevelt read it, paused, and then authorized a project so secret that even the vice president would not know its full scope. It was called the Manhattan Project. The goal was simple in theory and terrifying in practice: build the world's first atomic bomb before Germany could. To do that, the United States needed enormous facilities to enrich uranium, an element that barely existed in usable form. The work would require unprecedented amounts of electricity, water, manpower, and isolation. After surveying dozens of sites, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers chose a remote valley in eastern Tennessee, surrounded by hills, far from the coasts, and close to hydroelectric power from the Tennessee Valley Authority. Within weeks, the government quietly seized 59,000 acres of land. Families who had lived there for generations were given eviction notices, often with just days to leave. Some thought it was a joke. Others assumed a military base was coming. No one was told the truth. Bulldozers arrived before many had packed. Churches, farms, and cemeteries were swallowed by construction. Then, almost overnight, a city rose from nothing. Oak Ridge did not exist on any map. Officially, it was known only as Site X. Workers arrived by the thousands, then tens of thousands. By 1945, Oak Ridge had a population of over 75,000 people, making it the fifth largest city in Tennessee, yet it remained completely secret. Every resident carried an ID badge. Letters were censored. Phone calls were monitored. People were warned never to ask their neighbors what they did for work, and most didn't know anyway. The strange thing was that nearly everyone in Oak Ridge had a job, but almost no one understood the purpose of that job. Young women fresh out of high school were recruited from across the country with promises of good pay and patriotic duty. Many had never left home before. They operated machines with dials and gauges, carefully following instructions they were forbidden to question. If a dial went out of range, they were told to turn a knob. They were never told why. One woman later recalled that she didn't know she was working on the atomic bomb until she read about Hiroshima in the newspaper. Scientists lived alongside janitors, construction workers, and soldiers, all separated by layers of secrecy. Even brilliant physicists often knew only their own narrow task. One group worked on gaseous diffusion, another on electromagnetic separation. They competed without knowing they were competing. Billions of dollars were spent, more than the cost of the entire Manhattan skyline at the time, without public debate or congressional oversight. Oak Ridge consumed electricity at a staggering rate. At one point, it used more power than the city of New York. Its facilities ran day and night, humming with urgency. Massive buildings stretched for half a mile, filled with machines so complex that even their designers sometimes didn't fully understand their behavior. Accidents happened. Radiation exposure was poorly understood. Workers fell ill. Records were classified. And still, the clock was ticking. In July 1945, scientists in the New Mexico desert successfully detonated the world's first nuclear device. When word reached Oak Ridge, carefully filtered and incomplete, some scientists celebrated quietly. Others felt dread. They understood better than anyone what had been unleashed. Weeks later, uranium enriched in Oak Ridge was used in the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. In a single flash, over 70,000 people were killed. By the end of the year, that number would double. When President Harry Truman announced the bombing to the world, residents of Oak Ridge finally learned what they had been building. Some cheered in the streets. The war was over. Their sons and brothers would come home. Others felt sick. One worker reportedly said, "I wish I had known because I would have